Hello and welcome to my first little video. Well, second, but yeah, you've already watched the first, so that's cool. Today I'm going to talk about transporters, more specifically how they seem to be in enterprise and how that sort of seems to work and work out, more importantly. A lot of people seem to carry on about, oh, there's a transporter on the enterprise and that's evil and naughty and we can't have that. Well, you're wrong, we can. Obviously because we've seen it, but more importantly, it works out quite well, actually, the timetable between when it could be invented and when we see it on Enterprise and things that we know of happening later. People are always going to pull out the transporter psychosis thing being determined in 2209. Now that's just under 60 years after Enterprise is set, but that doesn't really present any sort of problem. When any technology gets invented, it's not just invented and then whiz bang, hey presto, it's everywhere the next day. It takes a lot of time, depending on what the technology is, to get from when it's invented to when it's everywhere. I mean, this isn't something like Facebook where, 1 minute it's not in existence and the next minute there's, 300 million people using it. I mean, you've only got to look at things like game consoles and TVs and all these fancy new TVs that they keep coming out with at these huge big trade expos in Japan that we see on the news all the time. And they expect that it's going to take 2 or 3 years before it's widely available on the market. And even when it is, it's, $10,000 a pop, which not everyone can afford. And with a transporter, that's only going to be an even bigger problem. I mean, this is a device that splits up your molecules, converts them to energy, beams them off over yonder, and then recombobulates you back into proper matter again. I mean, that's going to take a long time for it to be everywhere. So, what I think we've got is, okay, we see it in 2151, which is when the first season of Enterprise is set. This is the first one that's ever been put on a ship, ever. It's obviously been invented sometime before that and been tested and tested and retested and tested some more and tested again just for good measure and probably tested again just for good measure. That's all behind us. This is the first one that's ever been put on a ship or a base or anything ever. And they hardly ever use it, especially in the first season. In the second season they use it a little bit more, third season a little bit more, fourth season a bit more again. But it's still something that everyone's like, ooh, not sure about that transporter. I don't think I might take a shuttle pod today, just to be on the safe side. So that's what they do. Now, you've got about 60 years between Enterprise and transporter psychosis being discovered on Delinear 2. Now, people have to remember transporter psychosis is a rare thing. Rare, very rare. It only happens once every, 10, 20, 30,000 people who get beamed around, if they get beamed around a lot, and if they're susceptible to this particular condition. So the idea that you're going to, have something invented and then instantly have it, out everywhere is wrong. The idea that you're going to have it instantly out everywhere and instantly know about this rare condition is also wrong. It just doesn't make any logical sense. So we have to consider those two things when we're going to talk about this. You can't just, say, oh, it's invented. Oh, we've got a horrible disease. Oh, quick, we better fix it. These things take a long time, decades in some cases. And that's exactly what we see in Trek between Enterprise and the information that we're given in Next Gen about transporter psychosis. So that actually works out quite well. It's actually very sensible that there is a transporter on Enterprise, especially the way they've done it. It's the first one. It's not used very often. Everyone's scared to use it. It makes sense with what we see afterwards. What I also think was probably going on in the minds of the producers and the writers and everyone else is, you know, 6 to beam down is as much a part of Trek as, you know, engage warp engines or fire phases or whatever. You know, if it's not there, it's going to be noticed. Now, we don't see it as often, obviously, but it's there enough that there's that familiarity, that connection with what we've all known before. And I think that was probably something that they thought about when they were writing it and producing it. They wanted to have connections between what they were about to do and what had gone before. And that was one of the ways that they could do it. I'd also point out that I've seen several times over the last 10 years, maybe even longer, bits, little newspaper articles in my local paper and national papers, things on the internet, whatever else, about various researchers and physicists and everything else in different universities all over the world actually working on transporters as we speak. One I remember reading once was somewhere in the UK, York I think it said, they actually seem to be doing it backwards to what we've seen in Trek, in so much as that in Star Trek we had transporters and they'd been around for ages, and then we had things like replicators, which were an outgrowth of transporters because they used similar technology to do similar sorts of things, but on a limited scale and in a slightly different way. Well, these researchers seemed to be, in an effort to try and invent a transporter, seemed to be actually inventing a replicator, which is kind of funny, but the way it was described in this newspaper article, at least, it was that they had managed to replicate several particles of light from one place to another. Now, I've heard tell of people who've been doing that, not with just a couple, but with whole strings of these sort of light molecules, which is obviously an advancement of that. So, I mean, this is being worked on right now. So in 100 years' time, or slightly more than 100 years, actually, where are we going to be? You've got to ask yourself that question. Are we going to be beaming left, right, and center all over the place? If they're already working on it now, and have been for the last, 10 odd years, 10, 15 years, 120, 130 years from now, having a transporter is not that far out of the question. And then 60 years on from that, less than, discovering, this disease that is very, 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 very rare, is really not that far-fetched. It makes absolute sense, actually, when you sit down and think about it. So, to all the naysayers out there, I'd say Enterprise wasn't perfect. Definitely not. Nothing ever is, but it has had its issues, okay, but transporters wasn't really one of them. Sorry, but it's the truth. Okay, that's enough for transporters. I'll let you all post whatever you want on the end of this, and you can argue with me, and I'll probably argue back. And we'll see where we go. I don't know what I'm going to talk about next time, but I hope you find it interesting. Thank you.